Hello and welcome to the Varietal Show. If you've never been here before, well, you're watching Varietal Literature's YouTube channel, and what we do here is have a little fun with narrative. It's a cozy corner of the internet for narrative. And what we are doing tonight is we're playing a solo tabletop RPG that I must admit we have played before, but we haven't played for a long time, and also it is Halloween time. So we are going to, oh wow, the frame is so much smaller on this. Let's see if I can adjust that. Yeah, we are going to play a game about body horror that we played before. It's really more about like drawing plants though, not to disappoint anybody. And we're going to pick up where we left off. Now, the reason why I hadn't played it in a while is that I didn't have a computer that could run it. Why is this so small? I'm sorry, I'm trying to figure this out. I think something about my proportions changed. Anyways, if you want to watch this stream, if you're not watching the stream live anyways, you can go down to the description below and there will be timestamps that let you jump ahead to whatever section of the show interests you the most. If, for example, you're not interested... Oh, I see what's happened. You're not interested in watching a man adjust his stream settings. Feel free to go down and click. It'll even including if you just want to see the story we came up with at the end. But if you are watching it live, then over to the side here, there is a live stream chat that will be helping me play this game by helping me interpret prompts and so on. And for that reason, I encourage you to join up. We already have in there a few folks. First one I see is Tammy, who's been having some health problems lately, and I'm happy to hear is going to see the doctor tomorrow. Hello, Tammy. Thanks for watching. Jumstore is unfortunately having another migraine. Well, that's okay. I'll try not to. Jumstore, if you have a migraine, the outro splash screen, maybe jump off before that comes up. I won't say more than that, but I'll just say it's probably not good for a migraine. And I see that GS is here. Hello, GS. It's good to see you. But for those who've been struck by the hurricane, I hope you folks are okay. I think some people in my chat were affected by that, and I certainly hope they're okay. And also, because I keep forgetting to do it, and I always mean to do it, hello, Uncle Kitty. Say hello to Uncle Kitty, chat. Anyways, let's get to the stream. Sorry for the bumpy start. Let's talk about the game and remind you how it's played. This part of the stream is called Lit Games. It stands for Literature Games, and it is the whole stream is what it is. The purpose of which is to play a solo tabletop RPG and see what kind of story we can write using its prompts. And the one that we're playing tonight is one called Exclusion Zone Botanist, which we've played before. It comes from Exunt Press. We played before, actually, 2 of their games. On the second one, the creator jumped into my chat, and I have opened this on stream before, but I want to remind people, sent me physical copies of these 2 books. One was The 11th Beast, which we've played before, and the other one was Exclusion Zone Botanist, of course. It's a really nice quality little book. I will say I'm not like sponsored insofar as like there's no like deal or anything, but obviously they sent me free stuff, so you take that for what you will. As a sort of thanks for streaming, they sent me this, but I would guess I will say, as far as I know, you can go to their website and still buy these books if you want the physical copies. Come with a little map and so on. We are going to be doing it all digitally, though. And the way that that's going to work is a mixture of typing. Witchery says, chat is vexing me. It didn't send my hellos. Well, it sent that, so I'm glad you're here, Witchery. It's good to see you. Witchery, you mentioned that you make zines. What kind of zines do you make? And where can we see them? This one involves drawing. I'll remind you guys that it involves drawing. It's basically you are a person who is going into the exclusion zone. Now, normally exclusion zones, of course, are like things like radiation poisoning or something like that. But what this game's perspective is if you've ever seen the movie Annihilation, it's more that kind of exclusion zone. It's not literally Annihilation. It takes some inspiration from other places, but it's basically you're a botanist. You're sent into this strange none are finished yet. The whole family situation happened. Oh, I got the impression that they were old. Okay. Anyways, yeah, the premise is you're a botanist. You get dropped in to research plants, but if you're there too long, you turn into plants. So that's the gist of it. I will read us back what we did last time because it was almost a year ago. In fact, this was the last thing I played before I found out I was celiac, which is significant to me and no one else. Anyways, the gist of the game is that you need some dice. Like so, d6 dice. And then you roll for a few reasons. You actually don't roll to find a plant every time. You have... I'm going to very quickly describe this. It's going to sound complicated, but it really, really isn't. You have time. You start there at 5 a.m. and you can go as late as 10 p.m. Okay, and that's what this little bar across the top represents. RV1, RV2, RV3, RV4, RV5, and RV6. And you can see along the bottom there are 3-hour time chunks associated to it. Okay, so the way that this game is played and laid out quite well is you roll a d6, discovered a new plant. Otherwise, you make a check for corruption. So what is a map number? Well, I'm going to show you now. What I have here is the map and drawings that we made the last time. Sorry, the way that Zoom works in these programs is very unintuitive. These were the plants we found last time and I drew. As you can see, I'm no great artist, but this is the map. It's a standard map that comes with the game. We have our little character in the squares that they went through, or the hexagon rather, that they went through. You see how each of these hexagons is sort of associated with some numbers? That's what the number you're checking against. So you roll a d6, and then you see if that number is, I think, less than or equal to was the rule there. Yeah, so less than or equal to your map number. You've discovered a new plant, which means the further you go, the more likely you are to discover plants. Okay. When you discover plants, we go back to that chart I was on in a minute, where it shows us of a few various types of the plants that we can get. Whether they're big, what their leaves look like, and what their leaf arrangement is like, and if they have any unusual features. But we also have a plant discovery guide, which gives us a more in-depth idea. It was an addition later when he sort of realized that solo journaling was happening, because originally this was just a drawing game. That gives us a bit more detail that we can also use. Okay. Everyone's having trouble. Zombie Wolf apparently having Wi-Fi issues and may not be able to get in on time or whatever. I'm sorry to hear that. So that's the first step. That's how you check for plants. You roll a d6, you check it against where you are on the map, and depending on what comes up, you find a plant. And if you find a plant, you keep rolling d6s to get prompts, you draw that plant, and then we're going to journal a bit about it. And I'll talk about our premise for a journal. However, if you don't find the plant, you go to check for corruption. Actually, I think you check for corruption regardless, but you always check for corruption is my point. So, determine if you're corrupted by the EZ, the Exclusion Zone. Determine the risk value based on the hour above. So this is where the hours come in. We made it, I think, to the end of 7 a.m. or something. I'll double check. I have the times in our old journal entries, which means all we had to do was beat a 1, which was very unlikely that we weren't gonna beat a 1. So you roll 2d6 dice. If the individual values of both dice are less than the risk value, so yeah, 1 is impossible. I couldn't remember if it's equal to or not. You've been corrupted. And I'm not going to show the list because it spoils a bit. But there is a list, and basically you check off what symptoms you have. So every time you fail the corruption check, you check it off and you get a new symptom. And they're gross. It's gross body horror about becoming a plant. But if either of the 2 dice are equal to or greater than the risk value, you are safe and you keep moving. And then when you move, you pick a place to go on the map. Yeah, and then you begin the cycle again. One thing I really like about Exhumed Press and their works is they're very well described, which is a thing in the indie tabletop RPG scene that could use a great deal of improvement. Oh, why my back is so itchy today. It's always just out of reach. Okay. So let me read you what we had last time, because it's been a year and I'm sure you don't remember. I called this one Coming Up Roses. So this is what we wrote back in November of last year. And I think the premise is strong enough we can just continue it. This journal is not for me. This journal is for my daughter. Should the forest take me, please let this journal explain why I'm gone. So we started on a sort of dark and serious tone. I should say, when I originally wrote this, I hadn't seen Annihilation, but now I have. My dear, though the district warden claims this forest is merely an anomaly, I'll tell you now, it creeps as a cancer up our reinforced walls. If I cannot find an answer in its foliage, then it will consume us all. It will consume you. I realize my work has taken me from you in these years past, and now I suppose for all things to come. I hope the lessons I record here will give you wisdom without the attrition of living through folly. So, pretty standard premise, I think, for this kind of thing. I watch now the old iron drop ship. I made that 2 words. Spin its propellers and disappear back over the high walls of our city. Its winds shake and twist the thick foliage underneath. A mist of pollen thickens the air for the next half hour or so. I pull my mask over my face, but the filter is so worn I can assume it does nothing. I march onward into the vines. 5 a.m. I pick through a gully with a thin, clear stream. The high stadium of granite ledges on either side are populated by ferns that coil in a bow towards the water. Nothing strange was found here. I'm feeling strong. Maybe the mask does work. Pushing forward. 6 a.m. I followed the stream until it slipped under a drooling cascade of thorn bushes, probably blackberries, but none were on the vine. I routed away up via a narrow game trail. It wound to and fro in a switchback and over soft old deadfalls sprung with pale shelves of bracket fungus. There was little else but the moss and shade on my hike out of the gully. 7 a.m. Small plant, linear alternate leaves, and then we had this additional thing about it having an exposed root, which comes from the additional guide. I dug my fingers into the soft rotting wood and then pulled myself up into a low valley between rows of tall old oaks. There, standing singular amongst the tussling grasses, was a tall plant I have never seen before. Its alternating linear leaves were the color of a caramel sunset, but diminutive next to the gnarled and knobbled violet tubers that arched up like the legs of a tall spider before plunging into the black musty soil. It seems that the strange plant had seeded over a dense layer of clay and had to reach high and wide to find stability. It would have been so easy to wander past it, disregarded as just another drying fern, but there in the nest of its own vibrant roots, I am forced to recall how much sits below the surface. My dear, never assume the leaves tell a story that the hidden roots can't broaden. When you look upon a person, ponder how much you do not know of them rather than presume there is little there but a face. This strange fresh sprout of leaves with flecks of fire I shall call a caldera plant. 8 a.m. we found another plant. The field ahead curved down into the natural culvert that gave way to thick mud and the hum of biting flies. I probably would have gone another way if I hadn't caught sight of a row of small stems laden with wide green scoops of leaves. Each of those leaves were stung with a vermilion spadix. The plant stood up in a pool of filthy water, drawn up and held in pustules on the plant. It had the stench of rotting death mixed with sharp, sweet, nearly sour smell of a morning glory, but gone off in some way. I peered into the puddle of murky fluid with my flashlight, and I saw the pale bones of some small rodent dissolving. It was a carnivorous plant, that much was clear. The sweet scent and the inviting colors were lies that cost more than one thing, its life. I wondered if perhaps they did not smell the rot of their compatriots before fumbling into the trap. Perhaps they did, but the sweet smell beckoned more strongly to their needs and their hunger. Isn't that always the way, my dear? We risk a thing because we know to be rotten because it is also sweet and pretty. Well, a pretty face does not betray noble roots, and a sweet smell does not negate the rotten things. Trust your gut on that, dear. Don't go where you know death wanders. And that's what we wrote last time. And also we drew our two plants, which I suppose having been described, I'll remind you what they look like, because I'm going to turn them off now. Turn off that layer. Whoops. This was the caldera, with its spidery purple tubers above ground. And this was, apparently we called it the Whisper. I remember calling it the Whisper. I guess that's the one that ate the plants? Ate the animals? Anyways. We gotta blank the book. Go to a new page. And that's where we are in the story. We're writing a journal for our daughter who we don't expect to see again, to try and figure out how to stop this overgrowing and malicious forest from consuming my home. And the way it works is that when we find a plant, we try to tie it to some sort of lesson that he wants to pass on to his child. And we draw the plant, and that's about it. Yeah, I don't notice any real lag there, Zombie Wolf. Maybe there's a bit of one, but of course it's hard for me to tell because I'm like a full minute ahead of you folks. Anyhow, the things are not as they appear. Okay. Green is where we've been. And then the white is places we can go. So what I will do is very briefly. Oops. That's way too big. Just going to use the mouse for this. I do have a drawing pad, but I'm going to use the mouse for that. You see how there's a hex here for A, B, and C. And with that in mind, I am going to make a little poll in the chat to see what direction we want to go. So, what are we drinking tonight? I have some tea. How about you folks? There it is. It's live in the chat. If you're not obviously watching this live, then that means nothing to you. And if you are watching it live, but you don't have like a YouTube account or something, you won't be able to interact with it, I don't think. But if you are here, feel free to vote. I'll close it in a couple of minutes as I catch up to chat a bit. One downside is it puts it over new chat. How's that good design? Witchery can't see polls on our current device, I don't think. Oh, too bad. GS is drinking cranberry juice. How sweet? You going like raw with a really tart thing, or is it like a really sugary sweet kind of punch, or is it like, oh, maybe it's like a sugarless thing, like as we said, the styrofoam approach. Tammy says sleepy time with honey. What's the base tea for sleepy time? Is it like an herbal? Is it green? I mean, it probably isn't green because that'd be caffeinated. It's got to be herbal, right? You have a Twinings tea with melatonin in it. That is a strange mixture. I don't know if I would want melatonin in a tea. I mean, I've taken melatonin before. Witchery says, I generally watch my iPad, but it's an old iPad, and I don't think YouTube deems it capable of polls for some reason. Maybe it's more that it's Apple than it's old. Maybe they just don't like it being Apple. I'm gonna probably close the poll in about 3 minutes. I guess I should say if it's a tie or anything, I'll flip a coin. I'll use my Metroid coin. GS says the cranberry juice is the real deal, bitter as hell. Tammy says herbal, I think it's chamomile or chamomile, depending on where you're from. Witchery says, I mean, my old iPhone gets the polls. Oh, that's strange. I do know that Apple doesn't really get every feature because they hate each other. All right. Ending the poll. 3. Why am I counting down? You're like a minute behind me. Poll's ending. All right. Everyone went with B at 50%. B. There was some votes for C. Although now that I look at it, I don't know if we could realistically... Well, I guess we could just fudge it to get to C. Okay. Let's move ourselves to B. Erase our numbers. Color in our new spot. This game definitely has a bit of a slower pace, partially because it's more complex. Also, because... so we're in a 3 segment. Okay. But also because... it just has a more things going on. It involves drawing and stuff like that, which is a lot more like chill than writing, to be honest. Not to say drawing isn't difficult, but drawing is a different sort of process than writing when you're in this setting. Okay, so we are at... What time? We were at 8 a.m., so this will be 9 a.m. We have traveled, so we need to check if we found anything. So I'm going to roll my clear green dice here. I felt like green was appropriate because it's meant for plants. We rolled a 6, which means we did not discover a new plant because our area score is 3. And 6, kids, is bigger than 3. So now, instead, we will check for corruption, briefly describe what happens, move again, and see if we find a plant there. Zombie Wolf says, hey, I just thought of this. How old is our daughter? Because if she's still a child, then are we a terrible father setting her up for future abandonment and daddy issues? The terrible father is up to judgment. He is trying to stop parasitic plants from destroying his home and his daughter. So, like, he's risking his life to try and build a future for her, I guess. You can look at it that way, but probably, yes, abandonment. Yeah, that's fair enough, Witchery. Okay, check for corruption. So determine the risk value based on the hour above. We are into risk value 2. So if we roll a 1 on both our dice, we'll start to be corrupted and the body horror will start. But I don't think that's going to happen. Otherwise, we'll be fine. It is a 5 and a 6. Okay. All right. Before we move, then, it's time for us to describe what we find. Witcher says, but it is spooky season. Yes, it is. Okay, I'm just going to move my drawing pad for a moment. It's a whole operation here. All right, folks. We just came in out of a sort of pond. field had curved down into a natural culvert, gave way to thick mud. So we're in like a swamp. So we're in a muddy swamp. We just moved a zone over. The plants are inevitably getting thicker as we move in. What is sort of the next major feature of the area that we're entering? So like, is it a lot of underbrush so thick you can't see through it and we have to hack through it? Is it a lot of like deadfall for no obvious reason, just recently fallen trees or something we have to climb over? Like, what is it that you see in your mind as our like core feature of this area of the trip? We won't find any unique plants on it, but I will be able to sort of describe what happens there. Witchery says, obviously, I hate this time of year. That's canon now. Same with Zombie Wolf. They both have my vote is for Deadfall. Sounds spooky. Okay. Obviously, your favorite time of year is July 4th. Witchery says it is spring here. Oh, that's right, I forgot. 9 a.m. I was still spitting flies and shaking the mud from my boots when I came into a wide space of fallen trees. It stretched a kilometer or so in either direction. In any direction. It's more than two directions. As I recall, I feel like we had this conversation with Witchery last year. I think you said that it's just less of a thing in Australia. Which makes sense, because it's basically less of a thing most places. I actually really like spring. I know that's not the cool answer. I know everybody wants to be the grim fall, but I like the spring. Oh, I see. We just celebrate holidays with wild abandon. No notion of their seasonal appropriateness. Blows on fake snow. I mean, to be fair, we're getting down to fake snow up here too. It doesn't really snow much anywhere anymore. Stretched a kilometer or so in any direction. I would say it's sort of fallen off here. It used to be a bigger thing. Not just that I got older, but like less and less kids come to the door, and just you see less on the streets. Stretched a kilometer or so in any direction. It was a forest. It was a forest, but certainly was barely more, but now was barely more than a lumber yard. The trees looked freshly torn from the soil. The broken stumps still bled sap. The leaves still had shades of green. Oh yeah, I've heard that. Yeah, I've heard that it just, A, is very expensive to get stuff in Australia, and B, very slow. I've mentioned before that I'm in the Nerf modding hobby, and one of the like centers, there's like, outside of America, there's kind of two centers for that hobby. One is Singapore and one is Australia. And Australia mainly because you guys can't have airsoft, so both the airsoft and the Nerf people kind of come together on that. But they talk about how long it takes them to get parts there, because all our parts are like bespoke handmade things by some guy in like Oregon, right? Zombie Wolf says, I like fall because it's the cool off after the blistering summer and you get to start wearing soft, snug, cozy things. So the thing is, I'm never cold enough to ever wear anything different. Like I will wear a t-shirt unless it actually starts snowing, then I'll probably wear something else. But like I will wear a t-shirt right down to the end. So the temperature never gets low enough for me to put on my jackets and stuff that I like, because I just start sweating. So that appeal isn't there. And then what's happened is the older I've gotten, the more the blue light of winter, especially where I live, where we live really, it affects me more and more, especially as I started to get in my 30s. Witchery says, I feel like this is a reason to get a 3D printer. Yeah, definitely. A lot of the guys just get 3D printers. The leaves still had shades of green. As I clambered not fallen. You guys let me write falled. You let me make a fool of myself on the internet. Yeah, Tammy, I'm that guy. The guy who's wearing shorts in the below freezing weather, yeah. Obviously some of that is weight though. Like the biggest thing that keeps you warm is body weight. And as I lose weight, I get a little worse at that. But even fairly thin, I can really handle the heat. We were staring at Fald for quite a while. Let's say something. Obviously, Fald is not a word. As I clambered over it, like it's one thing to be like, you should use a different word. That's just subjective, sort of backseat creativity. But like, if I'm just writing a word that doesn't exist, like, maybe let me know. The leaves still had shades. I'm probably gonna regret that. The leaves still had shades of green. As I clambered over the toothy bark of these hundreds of hurdles, I saw signs that their felling was sudden. Is felling not a word? No, not feeling. Felling. Someone tell me if felling is a word. It feels like it should be. That's a fair point, Zombie Wolf. I have made up words in the same way that he does sometimes, and editors have argued with me, and sometimes I just ultimately agreed that it wasn't worth the effort. But I mean, language is a creative process, but I'm not trying to be that creative with random stories on the stream. That's like private stuff where I have time to think about it. I saw signs that I remember this one time. I won't say specifically what story because I don't want to highlight that part of it. But there is a story where I did something that was grammatically the wrong sort of tensing for what was happening. But it was purposeful. It was to distinguish that sort of statement from a more banal version of that statement that people might just absorb and move past because it had significance. It was a way to sort of make a person pause and ponder that sentence and its secondary meaning. And this random editor I was talking to just didn't get it at all. Like, I tried to describe it a few times. I didn't really have my choice in editor, so it was just some sort of editor for a whole volume of things. And that they wanted to include the story in. So I was like, I can't remember. I think she just let it go. I think I won per se. I don't normally actually really argue that much with editors. They're usually right, but sometimes I do little weird things like that. Not very often. And editors are always like, are you sure? I saw signs that their felling was sudden. Torn wing, robin wings. Torn wings of robins and the dull-eyed carcasses of deers spoke to a violent sweep through the thick old oaks. The vines, however, grew their carpet so quick. Wait. Thick in what seemed to be brief time. Were things not rotting as they should? Or were these vines crawling too quick? Zombie Wolf says, Witchery, my Nona is the exact opposite. He's always wearing sweaters and saying some very unseemly words about how cold it is, even in 100-degree Fahrenheit weather. I think one of the greatest testaments that sort of hangs out in your genetics of your ancestors is your tolerance for temperatures. Like I've mentioned before that a lot of my ancestors were Orcadian, which is just like a northern Scottish island in the middle of a half-frozen sea, right? Like, it's probably not surprising why my blood runs antifreeze. And then you have somebody from, Sicily down near the equator. Of course, they're going to need to manage the heat. The vines, however, grew their carpet thick in what seemed to be a brief time. Either way, I stumbled on as quick as I could for fear that this strange scythe might sweep past again and take me as it did the birds and trees. Okay. Let's see if we find a plant. The next one is 10 a.m., I think. Also see if we can get some corruption going. Otherwise, like, body horror isn't going to happen. Witchery says that's all of the northern Scottish Islands. Yeah, did I say something that seems like it contradicted that? I think I said it singular because I just assumed my ancestors lived on one. Because you can only live at one at a time. Like, I was picturing myself living there, if that's what you're clarifying. But yes, I am aware of what the Orkney Isles are. Okay. Another vote's coming in, but I gotta make the sheet. Do the sheet thing. Oh, I see. No, but you didn't need to explain. Oh, I think I need to explain because I don't think most people know what the Orkney Isles are, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't really have any room to write a letter on 3, so this is going to be a weird... little... poll where one location is A, the next one is 3, and then C. Let's make a poll. Which hex should we go to next? It rhymed! A, 3, C. And windy, Gia says, yeah, windy on an ocean too. But I will say, it's interesting. My partner does not like the wind. It doesn't like how strong wind feels on her skin. And since I was a kid, I remember I went for my birthday once to Victoria on Vancouver Island, not obviously American, or an American, English. But yeah, anyways. And there's this point out there where it's sort of on the open coast. So there isn't really any major landmass between you and it. Well, I guess it's not the open coast, but it is a fairly open piece of sea now that I think about it. Anyways, it's a point, and at the end of that point is this lighthouse, of course, you know, as you sort of see on those things. And the wind there was so strong you could just lean your full weight into it and not fall over. And I loved it. Loved it. Loved the wind. And then to find, this was long before I knew anything about my history, my ancestors. And then to find out that it came from these windy isles. I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, Witchery says, what gets me about those islands, to be honest, and maybe the UK broadly, is the lack of trees. You know what you really appreciate? I think I've mentioned this before, but when I went on my biking trip around the Gulf Islands, you really appreciate that the islands are the peaks of mountains. because the hills there were steeper than anything I've ever encountered anywhere else. It was nuts how steep the hills were. And I was like, oh, I'm on a mountain peak. Okay, I will be stopping in about a minute, so make sure you get your vote in for our next location. Oh, sorry, I didn't transfer it over. You don't even know where you're voting for. There we go. Way to go, Rory. Oh yeah, Zombie Wolf says that's what I was doing when I was checking my mail, but I only weigh 110 pounds. I mean, I think I was like 10 years old when I was doing this, so I might have only weighed like 110 pounds. I don't know if me now at like 6'4" or 5 or whatever the hell I am would. Yeah, that too, Witchery. There's not really any buffer for the wind. You tend to get like lower scraggly trees along the coast, which are really cool. They look like bonsais. But it's also just a rocky soil. Okay. Ending the poll. But you already know that, because I'm ahead of you. And the winner is C. Alright, we're taking the outer perimeter. Good, good. Our happy little guy. He's not happy at all, actually, now that I think about it. It's just a happy little icon. I can't remember if I made that. I think I might not have made that. I think I might have gotten that from somewhere, but I can't remember. We'll color in where we went. And hey, maybe we'll find a plant this time and we can actually engage with the mechanic of the game. There we go. All right. Let's roll our d6. Use a different green one this time. I have many green dice. Guess my favorite color. If you roll less than or equal to your map area number. I rolled, but it didn't really roll, so I'm going to roll it again. And move the stuff out of the way that stopped it. So we want less than 3? Yeah, because we're in an area with 3. We want basically 3, 2, or 1, and that means we'll find a plant. So 1. So 1. So we finally found a plant. Okay. Which means we get to do the plant rolling. Don't let me forget to come back here and check for corruption. We're going to draw a plant, and I'm going to forget. Okay, step 1. We need to assess the plant size. So, to do that, I roll a d6. It's another 1, which is small. So I'll make a note of that. Small. Number 2, we need to determine the leaf shape, which I think is such a cool concept for a game. Zombie Will says maybe the real plant was the friends we didn't make along the way. True. It's 5. Oh, I have to roll 2d6. Sorry. And add. 5 and a 6. So that's 11. Or orbicular? Orbicular? Orbicular. It's got to be that. I don't know. We're going to copy that word, though. Well, the real friends, I guess, are going to be the plants we turn into and then cross-pollinate with for the rest of our miserable lives. And then we need to determine the arrangement of the leaves. The leaves? Sorry guys, it's my first day speaking the English language. It's a 6, so it's a warlet, which I think we've had before, but that's okay. In ancient times, much of Europe and the UK was heavily forested. True. Which makes a lot of folklore make greater sense. Yes. But people fell forests for their own uses without too much thought, especially. Yeah, I mean, there was a time where it wasn't particularly toxic to see it as like man versus nature, so to speak. Yeah, I was just thinking that too, GS. You know, things were... The wilds had a hold on things. The Huller were there. Okay, note any unusual features. Roll 2d6 and add. It's another 6 and a 5, so that's 11. Glowing with cold blue light. Okay. And then finally... we use this one. I think actually you can use the plant discovery guide instead of the table I just rolled on, but I'm using both just to see what we come up with. Okay, so the way this works is you need a light colored and a dark colored dice. You don't need it, but you need to keep track of one or the other. I have a light and a dark here. Roll both dice, but they mean different things. Well, they both rolled a 4, so I guess it doesn't matter, but the dark die determines the plant group. So that means I need to go down to 4, which is here, plant group C. And the second, the light die, which is also a 4, determines its feature. Teeth vines. The plant rises and moves its vines. Each one is lined with rows of pure white teeth. You can see a deer carcass wrapped in tendrils, slowly being shredded apart. Oh, how about that? The plant senses you are near and reaches out towards you. Oh, hello, Mr. Vine. With teeth. Good to see you. Keeping those teeth clean. Yeah, and then we invented engines and it was all downhill from there. Yeah, it used to be not the end of the world to be that way. Witchery says, I struggle to believe anyone who would willingly play these games wouldn't have at least 2 sets of dice. Yeah, I know, yeah. It is funny for me to read these things and they'll be like, if you don't have dice or a pack of cards, you can go to these websites and get them. And that's nice. That's nice to do that. You know, you want your stuff to be accessible. But who's going on itch.io, digging up your incredibly obscure indie solo tabletop RPG who doesn't already have like 6 packs of dice, right? Like that, I don't know. Okay, so Witchery says, oh no, curse fine times. Here's what I think we'll do. We're going to discover that all that deadfall is something this vine did. So we'll track the vines back and discover that they start to be sprung with teeth as they get thicker, and then just find a mass that's reaching out and sawing down trees in a particular direction. Yeah, that's right, Witchery. It's not even solo D&D. It's like so... it's it's like having a primer on like what the term vegan means at you know, a hippie commune in some private island that you had to like take a canoe over to, and you'd be like, I don't think I'd be here if I didn't already know the meaning of that word. Anyways. Let's draw the plant first. All right. Gonna shift some stuff. So it is glowing blue, right? I had to move my mic, so hopefully the sound's still okay. You can't see it, but I can. Small orbicular whorlet, glowing with cold blue light, and then vines, I guess, coming out of it with teeth. I really like wolves, obviously. You do as well, Zombie Wolf. But I will say that the wolves we have now, especially in North America, are not the wolves of, like, the myth of old. Wolves used to be a pretty formidable thing. Not to say that we wouldn't like them still, but you'd probably be more scared of them than we are now. Okay, blue. Blue. And we gotta go with a sort of unnatural, uncanny blue, obviously. So I guess I'm looking at, like, the whorlets and the orbicular leaves and stuff are mainly, like, clustered in the center. They sort of glow. And then their vines will be reaching out. Witchery says they were big, yes, and they were more aggressive for it. Am I not on the right? Oh, I'm not on the right layer. There we go. Could probably make that a bit thinner. Actually, I'm not going to use this brush. I'm going to use the inking pen. This is a more hypnotic process, I will say that. I'll try not to forget you guys are there. Oh yeah, Zombie Wolf says, I've heard the reports of European wolves breaking into people's houses in the middle of the night to carry off human midnight snack. Yeah, they were savage. Like, you know, it's easy to sort of forget that we used to be in the food chain more. Obviously, you don't forget that, but I think a lot of people do. So, you know, when you read stories about people like hunting wolves or foxes or whatever, you know, it's not a happy thing, but there is a reason why that was happening that maybe isn't so relevant now. That blue looks electric on my screen. Good. I want it to look very unnatural. Probably zoom in a bit more. We can see a little more. Does anybody in the chat make a consistent habit of drawing? For me, drawing was always just a little bit dull. Like, I don't mind doing it in this setting, but I'm doing some pretty low stakes drawing here. Like, once I have to start formatting, like, anatomy and stuff like that, I start to lose patience with the process, which is weird because obviously, you know, writing takes a long time. But it doesn't bother me. Same way. The round leaves are tough. Being out in the forest at my Nona and Nono and Nona's definitely reminded me I wasn't off the food chain. Saw many bears and mountain lions. So bears don't really scare me, but mountain lions do. I guess it depends on the season. Like, if it's the season when bears are either going into or coming out of hibernation, yeah, then you've got my attention, Mr. Bear. Oops. It's honestly hard to take bears seriously. They're a bit like horses that way, where people tell me about like the majesty of horses, and like I like horses, but they're goofs. They're big doofuses. GS says, bear in my yard all this week and a skunk on the back porch 2 days ago. Skunks are so cute. I mean, besides the one drawback, they are really sweet little animals. Gonna clean up this center a bit. Okay, we'll size you down. I suppose in case anybody who's a little hard of seeing is watching the stream, I'm drawing a sort of tall reaching, two strands of a tall reaching plant that are electric blue, and then around the leaves are going to be kind of a sunrisey orange. And then out from the bottom there, from a big bud, I haven't drawn it yet, but I will get to some vines with teeth. Are we going to give it human teeth, folks? I mean, I feel like the answer is yes, but that's much harder to draw. I don't know if I'm going to commit to that. Used to coyotes and raccoons usually. Raccoons are so funny, but they are destructive little things for sure. Just don't talk to a donkey that way, they'll wreck your day. Zombie Wolf says, yeah, there were too many bear maulings in my area for... I mean, you should always take them seriously. Don't take that as me not taking them seriously. What I'm saying is, if I see a bear, like, I know what I'm going to do, and I know probably they're going to leave me alone. Vampire teeth, Tammy says. I mean, I'll do my best. Gia says, just any jagged teeth. Yeah, We'll see, because I don't want to spend 40 minutes drawing teeth. Right? We'll see what I come up with. Yeah, it's just that normally bears just don't care. Like, if you're not aggressing on them and they're not super hungry, they just sort of wander on by. But cougars, mountain lions, they'll hunt you for miles. Moose are the real terror of the woods. Moose are a little further north for me, but yeah, they however much you think you know the size of a moose, they're bigger. Zombie Wolf says if you went with a human teeth, it'd have more of a berserk feel. Yeah, probably would, right? For those who don't know, Berserk is a manga. I think an anime. Yeah, it's got to be an anime. It's too popular not to have been an anime. Never underestimate the maternal instincts of a donkey. They were quite a few times I saw a coyote hanging from their mouth. Woof. Guess I didn't close that one. Just trying to fill in all these places and finding my gaps in the in my lines, so then it floods the whole page with the color. I felt like that was probably too thin. Alright, have to do some better drawing on these lines, because those were all too thin. Getting real distorted now, so zoomed in. Actually, this way. Tammy says you're doing a great job, Rory. Well, thank you. Don't usually like to have dead air, obviously, but I'm sure nobody wants to watch me draw forever, so I just decided to focus there for a minute. Okay. Witcher says small dogs have no concept of size. I think, honestly, having had a lot of small dogs in my life, the conclusion I came to is it doesn't do them any benefit to acknowledge their size, right? Like, they don't care. The things that cause them trouble is like are things that aren't gonna like leave them alone, so they may as well act big. It's probably unnecessary, but I'm doing a bit of shading on the plant before I go on to the vines. Okay. Witcher says the antlers of the elk were 3.5 meters across. Oh my god. I believe it though. Okay. Well, we could do a little shading on that other couple of other leaves. Should have put more thought into my light source here. Not sure any of this makes sense. It's probably enough fussing. Witchery says it's okay, Rory. Our little guy is slowly going out of his mind and doesn't have light sources. Yeah, this is not really maybe on par with the vibe of the game to be so meticulous. I want to make sure the shading's correct. Okay. See how this looks as a vine color. Just drawing all these vines now. They kind of just look like roots, though. I think I need to wind them up more. I mean, if I was a good artist, I would reflect the prompt and have it, like, grinding away at a carcass of an animal, but that's more than I know how to do. Zombie Will says, my Nona and Nana, Nana is what I used to call mine. Doesn't get new dogs either after they died. Didn't get new dogs. But they have great aim with their guns, so their sheep are quite safe. Yeah, it's tough to replace an animal. Zombie Will says, for the record, it looks very nice, Ray. Well, thank you. GS says, yes, you have a hidden talent. That might be a bit much. I don't think that's true. I grew up around artists, and all of them are better than me. I'm friends with artists, all of who are better at visual arts, anyways, better at it than me. So, like, I had the benefit of a lot of education and so on, but it just never really held my interest very well. This is terribly zoomed. Let's get you guys back in frame. There we go. Now, the reason why I'm not making them electric blue is because in the last section we didn't describe them as such. I think you would have noticed that. So I'm sort of playing with this idea that it fades from this very electric blue to a more disguised natural color. I guess the, like, meaningless sort of world building that I have for that is they the core of it wants to look poisonous because that's like the brain of it, but the tendrils want to look innocuous so that things won't avoid it so it can grab it. Oh boy, teeth. I think it said the teeth had to be white. Pure white teeth. Each one is lined with rows of pure white teeth. God. Well, pure white isn't going to look great, so I'll do a sort of tinted white. Just trying some designs here, seeing which one I like. I wonder if I have a brush that'll work better for this. maybe this will work better. I don't know. Not optimistic. I mean, it does just kind of look like thorns. What could I do to offset that? Maybe ever so often it has kind of buck teeth. I think this might be what it has to be. I think I lack the talent to do more than this. Does anyone know if Gennaro was in the storm's path? I don't actually really know. I mean, I don't pry on where people live and ask them to dox themselves. Just as they show up well. I'm trying to like broaden and thicken them a bit so they look a little uncanny, but they kind of just look like mucus now. Zombie also says, I think she might have mentioned something about the storm worry, but I can't recall. She said her home was in danger. I just know that she liked this game. She's probably busy, but part of me was like, oh, I hope she's okay. Especially after the trouble she was having with her family there being in the hospital. Okay, I'll do a few more, but obviously I'm not going to be able to do all these vines. Or that would be the entire stream. We can say there's like grasping vines and then chewing vines. Yeah, GS, I do remember what the details. I just didn't want to broadcast them if they weren't here. Let's do those vampire teeth that were requested by Tammy. I think I'm going to have to go back to the inking pen to make them read. We can do better than that. There you go. A little bit of vampire teeth. I think it would look better with more teeth, but I don't want to spend too much time on it doing that. Yeah. Obviously, and a storm can interrupt that kind of care. Alright, one more down the middle to balance it out. Yeah, the other brush worked better. Zombie Wolf says you need Photoshop or just copy and paste the teeth. Oh, thank you to people who are giving compliments. I will never buy into Adobe again in my life. What a manipulative, terrible company. What I will do though is learn GIMP, which is the unfortunate name to the open source Photoshop, which I have on this computer, and I've resolved that I will sort of learn how to be minimally effective in it. All right. Well, let's write about the plant we found. Oh, also, we need to check our corruption. Thank you for reminding me. Because if we are getting corrupted, that's going to be irrelevant. GS says, much like your writing, we don't see it coming together until you read it back and we see it as a thing of beauty. Well, that is a very elegant compliment. But I'll say I was reading back the stuff I wrote before this stream, like the stuff I wrote last year. And there was some editing done. There's still some real stinkers in there. Okay. Let's check for corruption. Determine the risk value. I think the risk value was 2. Yeah. We're still at 2, right? This is 10 a.m. Yeah, we're still at 2. Okay, again, we're going to roll 2d6. Both dice below 2, then, in other words, if I roll snake eyes, then we're corrupted, and otherwise we're fine. 6-2. So neither is below. Zombie Wolf says, thank you for reminding me. Insert meme of Obama giving himself a medal. Witcher's recommending Affinity. Because so much of my circle of friends is animators, everyone has an opinion on what program I should be learning. So this is reflective of that. But yeah, anything but Adobe at this point. There's no denying that, like, Adobe is, like, Photoshop is probably still the best for that kind of work. But it's just the worst level of corruption in how they arrange themselves. I was dripping with sweat that clogged my mask. Dripping with sweat that clogged my filtering mask. Or that, what's the word that I would use here? Clogged the wrong word. But soaked, I guess. And I can move the notion of it being clogged to another word later on. I was dripping with sweat that soaked my filtering mask and made my breaths a struggle. I had to relent and pull it off. I pulled it off. The air was sickly sweet. I guess the mask was doing more than I gave it credit for. Garbage way to say that. Zombie Wolf says, nice wordplay, Witchery, for it's grand without costing a grand, indeed. You know, even if Photoshop was expensive, like cost $1,000, like it probably honestly should for the development and complexity of it, that wouldn't even be so bad. They don't let you buy it anymore. And they go out of their way, if you did buy a copy, to try and make it so that that copy either is replaced or ruined. And there's no old editions. You can't, like, you know, if you did something and that's your edition and you don't want to move on to whatever update they have, forget you. Yeah, in the olden times it kind of did. Yeah, it used to be really expensive, and then they just learned that instead of letting anyone own it, they'll just put everyone on a monthly fee, which ultimately just costs more than the program ever did. It was in this hour of the hike over the deadfall that the machinations that had cleaved this forest flat became ever more apparent. Witchery says it was cheaper to send someone to America to buy Photoshop the suite than it was to buy it here. I believe that. I mean, like, I remember things like I'm blanking on the name, but like their video editing. When I used to do more of that, the video editing software was, depending on what software you get and from where, it was like $8,000 to $10,000 10 years ago. But I kind of respect that more, because like I feel like you would not charge $8,000 for a piece of software unless you had to, right? Like unless there was actual work behind it, because you already are on an uphill battle selling expensive software. I could be completely wrong about that, but and at least you owned it. Now the idea of ownership just doesn't exist. Not just in software, by the way. There's a whole bunch of things that they've done where it's like skeptical that you own anything. The carpet of vines that grew thick over the trees were becoming thicker. It began to turn from a pale green to an effervescent? No, not effervescent. I mean, ethereal kind of works, but I don't want to use that. Luminescent? Yeah, that's probably more what I want. To a faintly luminescent electric blue. The vines here were more active and grabbed at my ankle. Tearing scratches. In my flesh with their fine white teeth. The thin, what's the term for when vines, there's a term for it, the kind of vine that like searches out, finds where the rest of the vine goes. Witchery says, I have to go, I'll try to watch later. Well, as always, I hope that your life improves from the last few weeks of reports. And you have a good day. Enjoy your spring. Though it's still as warm as spring here. Phosphorescent would have worked well too, GS. Probably closer. But luminescent, I mean, we got phosphorescent in my back pocket then. The thinner vines reached, wound about my wrists and backpack if I did not keep moving. They pulled at me like a hound trying to lay down its prey. Lay down, arrest its prey. Seeking vines? Is that the name of them? I thought they were called like runners or something. What started as a novelty of the flora suddenly became a threat. Creeping vines, runners is legit. Is that the name for it? It was as I began to press... No, wait. There's a few thoughts in my head at once here. The ground was gracefully becoming more level as these vines grew more aggressive. Seeking and runners. Okay. So we were just right. GS says Google said. These were not unrelated features. As the beastly as I reach, as I followed my path to the tree line. Nope, this is a terrible way to start this thought. The thicker the vines became, the more prominent its bone white teeth were. When I finally, no, losing my thought, train of thought again. These teeth and thicker vines were strangling the deadfall. And the fallen beasts like a grinder. Once I finally laid eyes on its source, the ground where the vines were thickest. GS says, well, the images on Google for fast-growing vines are incredible. One house is completely covered in purple ivy. Man, I don't trust anything I find on Google Image anymore. Like 60% of it's just AI now. Once I finally laid my curious eyes on its source where the vines were thickest and the teeth as large as my fist. The ground was as level as a blast site. Little remained around the tall, now electric blue phosphorescent yes, or on the tall, now electric blue phosphorescent stalks that rose up above its army of chewing vines, and they were ruin of green wood mulch with shredded game meat. No kidding, Zombie Wolf. Zombie Wolf says my Wi-Fi acted up again. What said my wife acted up again? Did anything happen? Well, no. Witchery did leave, but you said goodbye. We discussed a little bit what the name for the vines that sort of like seek out ahead of all the other vines were, and we Googled and found that it was seeking or runners. And then Zombie Wolf said someone needs to create an AI art filtering app to remove AI generated pictures from your search results. Yeah, it's, as a person who DMs 3 different games and tries to find like NPC art and whatever else, so hard. Because I don't know, it's all ugly. You can just see it. You know, people say, oh, it looks so similar. And I guess to them it does, but no, to me, I can always tell. It looks terrible. Little remained around the tall blue, now electric blue of phosphorescent stalks that rose up above the core. The nexus, let's say. The nexus of these chewing vines. The ruin of greenwood mulch. Shredded gathered meat. The plant. The brain. This plant at its core looked like the dart frogs of South America? Dart frogs are South American, right? I'm gonna make myself look like an idiot if that's not true. Yeah, no, I'm 100% there with you, Zombie Wolf. I just was not too interested in something that can't write an autobiography. Or I'm not too interested in the art of something that can't write an autobiography. I think you need to be legitimate as an artist, but I think, I don't know, hopefully my point is taken. There's nothing there to be expressed. This plant at its core looked like the dart frogs of South America. Good. In the parlance of nature, it's was screaming at perusing beasts that it was toxic. Maybe it was, but I had no cause to test that. Still, I found it fascinating that the signs of its aberrations, the teeth, the odd colors, were only at its core. The farther, you got from it, the more innocuous, innocuous works fine, the vines became. The simple and forgettable, setting a trap. That would not be understood by its victims until it was half chewed. Okay, what's the lesson then? Remember, we got a daughter. This one plant, I could only conclude, had felled a forest. Zombie Wolf says, in case anyone's curious, that melatonin tea that I mentioned is hitting me harder than I thought, but I need to wait till the end of the post. My random trivia is winning so far. Well, if you hold out long enough, the effect disappears. So maybe, you know, you need to go to sleep. You should go to sleep. This one plant, I could only conclude, had felled the forest behind. I have rarely seen such destruction from a natural phenomenon. It made no sense. It would only destroy Fair enough, Zombie Wolf. It made no sense. It would only destroy the very source of its life. It could not. It was a stark reminder why I had to come. What would this do if its runners found their way over our walls? But I wonder if it's natural. These are the acts of men and women, not nature. You may see me, my dear, as making a false comparison. For aren't we nature? No. Nature never would ruin like this. Be like nature. Find that balance. And don't take all you can take. The teeth at the base nearest the high stalks with their sunset leaves. And cerulean stalks. Veins. We're not sharp, pale thorns, but molars. Okay. There we go. If you're coming to this part of the show, it's because you just want to know what we came up with, and what we came up with was a drawing and a couple of entries in our journal for the solo tabletop RPG Exclusion Zone Botanist, because it is a solo drawing sketching game, but also with some journaling options. Now we are continuing on to from a playthrough that we started back in November of last year, but I haven't been able to play this game because I hadn't had a computer that could run this program. The computer I did the last playthrough on has died. But a friend lent me this and we were able to play it, and that's why there's such a gap. So I will set up a playlist so you can watch the original and this one here. If you want to hear the first part of the story, you can go back to the beginning of the stream, or you can watch last year's stream on this and you'll get the first part of the story. I'm going to drop this in the middle and show you what we came up with. Yeah. So we're coming out of basically a swamp where we saw a plant that was carnivorous. 9 a.m. I was still spitting flies and shaking the mud from my boots when I came into a wide space of fallen trees. It stretched a kilometer or so in any direction. It was a forest. It was a forest, but now was barely more than a lumber yard. The trees looked freshly torn from the soil. The broken stumps still bled sap. The leaves still had shades of green among their browning edges. As I clambered over the toothy bark of these hundreds of hurdles, I saw signs that their felling was sudden. Under them there were torn wings of robins and the dull-eyed carcasses of deers, all of which spoke to a violent sweep through the thick wild oaks. Nothing slow. The vines, however, grew their carpet thick in what seemed to be a brief time, and I couldn't tell if things were not rotting as they should, or if the vines were crawling too quick. Either way, I stumbled on as quick as I could, for fear that this strange scythe might sweep past again and take me as it did the birds and trees. And then we found a plant. I guess I'll read it. Somebody remind me to show the picture. I'm going to forget. I'll read it first and then I'll show you a little doodle I did. I was dripping with sweat that soaked my filtering mask and made my breaths a struggle. I had to relent. I pulled it off. The air was sickly sweet in a way I did not expect. I guess the mask was doing more than I had assumed. It was in this hour of the hike, though, over the deadfall, that the machinations that had cleaved this forest flat became ever more apparent. The carpet of vines was growing over the trees were becoming thicker and began to turn from pale green to a faintly luminescent electric blue. The vines here were more active and grabbed at my ankle, tearing scratches in my flesh with their white teeth sprung from every side. The thinner vines wound about my wrists and backpack if I did not keep moving. They pulled at me like a hound trying to tackle its prey. What started as a novelty of the flora suddenly became a real threat. The ground was gracefully becoming more level as these vines grew more aggressive, but these were not unrelated features. The thicker the vines became, the more prominent its bone-white teeth were. These teeth and thicker vines were strangling the deadfall and the fallen beasts like a grinder. Once I finally laid my curious eyes on its source, where the vines were thickest and the teeth were as large as my fist, the ground was as level as a blast site. Little remained around the tall, now electric blue phosphorescent stalks that rose up above the nexus of these chewing vines and their ruin of greenwood mulch with shredded game meat. This plant at its core looked like the dart frogs of South America. In the parlance of nature, then, it was screaming at perusing beasts that it was toxic. And maybe it was, but I had no cause to test that. Still, I found it fascinating that the signs of its aberrations, the teeth, the odd colors, were only visible at its core. The farther you got from it, the more innocuous the vines became, simple and forgettable, setting a trap that would not be understood by its victims until they were half chewed. This one plant, I could only conclude, had felled the entire forest behind me. I've rarely seen such destruction from a natural phenomenon. It made no sense. It would only destroy the very source of its life. It was a stark reminder why I had to come. What would this do if its runners found their way over our walls? But I wonder if it is natural. These are the acts of men and women, not nature. You may see me, my dear, as making a false comparison, for aren't we nature? No. Nature never would ruin like this. Be like nature. Find that balance and don't take all you can take. The teeth at the base, nearest the high stalks with their sunset leaves and cerulean veins, were not sharp, pale thorns, but molars, distinctly human. Okay, and then we'll take a look at that plant that we found. That's where we got to. And I'll just show you the plant we came up with. This was the little drawing we came up with. As you can see, there's this sort of sunset leaves. And it's electric blue. And I didn't do too good with the fading on the vines, but not too good of a drawing. There should probably be more teeth. I'm sure after that description, these teeth are very unimpressive. I just didn't want to spend the whole stream drawing teeth on various tendrils. And as far as where we got on the map, this is as far as we got. Yeah, obviously I'm going to come back to this. I'm going to come back to this and tell him a plant. What a thing to say. I did promise in the advertisement some body horror, and that was a possibility, but we didn't actually roll any of, or really fail any of the rolls that would have started the body horror. So this game does have body horror. I'm just unable to predict when that will happen. Zombie Wolf says, with a random trivia, there's a superstition/folklore that says your dead relatives may visit you on Halloween in the form of a spider. So if you see a spider on Halloween, you shouldn't squish it. Well, I don't squish spiders anyways. I don't believe I should be allowed to kill something just because it scares me. To take a quote I saw somebody say online. GS enjoyed the art and story. Thank you, GS. Yeah, Tammy says, thank you, Rory, and everyone for the story and illustration. It's a blast. See you all on Tuesday. Yeah, indeed. Remember, we're in the middle of our Hello stream, so we will be getting increasingly more Hello streamy as we go along. So this was sort of like, this week was like light. We did mostly a dark comedy. Although it was pretty dark. A dark comedy from Norwegian folklore on Tuesday, which I recommend you watching. I guess maybe I didn't find the right angle in the advertisement, which is a shame because it's a really good story. But the viewership on it is very low, even for the season. So I hope more people give it a chance because I don't know how else to sell it. And it was an excellent story. But we'll also have some stuff coming up about ghosts and vampires and zombies in folklore and so on this month. And if I can think of anything, we might do sort of a longer thing on nearer to Halloween, a longer story. But I can't make that promise because I've yet to find anything that really fits the bill. Last year I did Carmilla, though. It took us 4.5 hours. You can go and watch that as you see fit. Anyhow. Zombie Wolf says, did you hear about that superstition, Rory? No, I honestly, there's so many, I feel like I don't know most of them. So yeah, that's a new one for me. Anyhow, thank you so much for coming in. If you happen to have a migraine, Jump Store, maybe click off the stream before I click to the final window because it is kind of a joke, but it won't be a funny one if you have a migraine. For the rest of you, I don't know, check your volume. Nonetheless, my name is Rory. This is Varietal Literature. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. Get out of my shop.